called, but where we.
I know.
I mean, I've been assigned it before.
So, yeah. So someday come in and sit somewhere.
Yeah.
Start
Throw
over.
everything back.
Throw everything.
Get your CE training.
Oh, no, I haven't.
Okay, not just you.
We're gonna hold off now. They said wait a couple weeks. It's been a couple weeks.
Please, yeah.
Someone can expand and I blew it away. And I don't know.
Are you still working? No, for free, no. Get a paycheck.
Most.
I'm a net real employee. Okay. Well, it's
Welcome everyone to the Thursday, October 12th Utility Policy Committee meeting. Call the meeting to order. It's almost 8:30, 8:29 3/4. Changes or additions to the agenda.
I have one.
Okay,
We could add the quarterly review of the financial highlights of the city's budget and actual.
okay, so 6,
It used to appear every month and we only do it quarterly, so it's easy to not put it.
okay, so 6F, quarterly financial review. Is a suggested addition. Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion. Or David.
Motion by Peter, second by David to adopt the agenda as amended. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Introductions, yes. We do have some new attendees today, so why don't we quickly just go around and say our names.
James Baker, I'm City Kalamazoo Public Services Director and City Engineer.
Libby Heine Cotswell, Utility Policy Committee.
David Anderson, City of Kalamazoo. Jeff Chamberlain with the City of Kalamazoo.
Peter Hefner, Utility Policy Committee.
John Crum, Gully Sewer and Water Authority Director.
Jim Escamilla, Evan Marsh.
Tom Lee, Prime Newhoff, Utility Policy Committee.
Okay, and then we have some,
Terry Andrews, Good Motion Regional Commission. Mark Elliott, Oxford Project.
um, thank you. And then online, we have attending from the City of Kalamazoo. Several others joining. From Stantec and Joe Bonholm and Rich Pearson. And then from Stantec, Jim Bierman and there's one other.
Danica.
Yeah, Danica. Okay. Item 4 is acceptance of the September 14th, 2023 draft minutes.
One small correction under number 7, new business professional service invoices. Said the motion for my bills, it says Tom Lee obtained. I abstained, even though I obtained the payment of the bill. It'd be abstaining.
That was my typo.
Okay. Okay, for a motion,
I'll move approval of the minutes as amended.
Second?
motion by Tom, second by Peter to adopt the minutes with the one amendment. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Public comment, item 5. Any public comment today? Anyone in here or online? Not seeing any raised hands online. So item 6, unfinished business, the water connection fee, system capacity buy-in fee, and we're reviewing this today for proposed action. We have both items 1, 2, and 3, that the water contract amendment, the fee methodology, and then, well, the implementation schedule we've already talked about.
Here, this is an action item, correct?
Yes,
So I guess for purpose of discussion, I'll move approval of the water connection fee. Is this just with one action on this fee, is that right? Even though there might be subsections?
we also, the contract amendment, the recommendation to amend.
So that's all in the, as part of this one action, these 3 things?
The action is actually 2 things. There's
Yes,
the
okay.
appendix F and then the contract amendment. Well, the contract, the appendix F is actually part of the contract. So, but we have been looking at it in 2 parts as we analyze this.
So should we look at it as we're approving this as a policy of the UPC, as well as recommending that this be, the contract amendment be adopted by all parties? Because then it goes from us as a recommendation to make the adoption or make the contract amendment, and then it goes out to everybody in the city.
That makes sense. I mean,
So, go ahead. So I didn't know I should make a motion now for purpose of discussion, but nothing else. So are we moving this then as a broad inclusive motion that includes all those actions, or are we doing this step by step?
You know,
Peter, I just wanted to share that the group that was looking at this got together and give you a little background, if I may. Got together and with Stan Tech and James and myself and Utility Financial Solutions, Mark Roshan, and walked through a methodology to calculate the fee. The fee, which is in this appendix F, for the most part, is simply taking the capital investment in the system, which is just the capital assets, less connections, which is typically from the shut off, I think, to the house, and eliminating that component. And then adding to that dollar amount the bond reserves, which are dollars that are required to be set aside for bonding, so cash that's sitting there, less outstanding bonds. So that's the nature of the calculation. It's not that we're taking the entire net assets of the system and dividing that up by RUs or ERUs. It is that we're really, the calculation and the rate consultants kind of conferred with each other and thought that a defensible method of making the calculation was to say these folks are buying a component of the capital investment of the city. And dividing that up with this ERU concept or so all of the individuals that had already purchased into the system and funded this would receive something basically a contribution towards future capital or operations of the system. So that was the nature of the discussion. We got together several times. And the calculation is on the second page of that appendix F. And I am personally, I'm comfortable with it is a calculation of a number that is the capital of the city. I would suggest that I don't know if this has occurred. I received this, I think with board packet stuff. I think that's how we all received this.
Yes.
Have the attorneys looked at this? And said yes? So my thought is I think we could say we approve the concept and the rate calculations, and that the attorneys ought to look at how this contract is being modified if they haven't already. I could see a couple tweaks that wouldn't change it, that might be useful. Those are my thoughts, and sorry to be a big mouth on this.
No, I appreciate that and your explanation. The first time I read this, it seemed like Greek, frankly, but I read it again in preparation for the meeting today, and it made more sense. But it's also helpful to hear it.
And if the attorneys have seen this, great, then, but if they have not, I think we could, run that, because this is going into the contract, we want to make sure they're okay with it before we.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. The attorneys certainly have seen the rest of the recommended contract amendments, but this was still under construction, so they, my knowledge, have not seen this. So that makes sense.
And so I would suggest that perhaps we would say, we approve of the calculation of the fee, if we do, and that we ask the attorneys to tweak this so they're comfortable with inserting it into the contract, if they haven't already seen it. And that kind of formalizes there's a fee, and it's in the rate as provided by Stantec to me anyways. Theoretically, I'm just trying to think ahead so that we don't approve something and next time we'll be getting something.
Can you translate that into?
So I guess I move approval of this document, reflective of minor adjustments that may occur subsequent to attorney review.
Yeah. I would second that.
The motion in the second. Discussion?
Just, this is very long, and maybe that fits into your motion. And maybe it can't be done because of the definitions in the contract. But ERU in this community, the RU is much more common to use. And unless there's a reason it has to be RU, I would suggest we switch it to REU. It's the same thing, it's residential equivalent unit. I'm imagining the ERU is equivalent residential unit. Yes. So,
I think that fits into that. But along that discussion, I was going to say that every other acronym we use in here, the first time we use it, we say what it is in front of it and put it in parentheses. We don't do that for ERU. So you have to flip back in to see what that stands for. Everything else, you know, system capacity fee and infrastructure does MBV, everything else spelled out before we use it. So we should do that in the document before we use whatever it is, ERU or
Are you?
REU.
Yeah,
Residential equivalent unit.
I would suggest as part of discussion that if, individuals have an opportunity to take a look at this document, you know, and really look at those issues, perhaps those on the board could forward their comments to Libby in the next,
Week.
week, and then we could forward it on to the, city James or the attorneys, that way they can implement that, and I suspect they will go to the definitions in the contract and do some things too, and perhaps we just, take a look at it at the next meeting, as long as the calculation's the same, we get the result.
So what does, if,
So we're gonna approve this
yeah,
with, modifications as suggested by the attorney with no alteration in the calculation itself. I'm kind of trying to sum up what you said. And therefore, it will go.
but we'll look at it again to review and those changes.
I just didn't read it, but
Then that's what I was clarifying, so whether or not we are asking for us to come back to UPC one more time.
I don't
for a
think
final
so.
look. That's what I thought, or, what, I think where we are in the process right now is we are basically, as a UPC, recommending these move forward and provide them to the attorneys so they can make the final
yes,
adjustments so that we can go to the respective boards.
yes.
I mean, I think that's where we are in the process right now. So our task here is to make any last minute changes and. I think
Over the
that's-
next week, yeah, and then forward that on so they can implement it into the contract.
And then the second part is this ordinance, which has a highlight at the top. That would need to be approved by the city as part of the ordinance package.
Yeah, and that's a later on our agenda.
Okay.
Or, that's okay, so there's this piece, appendix F. There's also the changes in the body of the contract. There were 3 changes, the definition of system capacity buy-in fee. There were 3 parts, and we looked at that in the previous meeting,
Right, correct,
but we didn't take action on it because we said we were waiting for appendix F.
right.
So we should act on both parts and do the same thing, move it forward.
Okay.
Pending attorney review, if they need to add a definition, beginning,
Sure.
they can, do that and we'll just look at it. Review it.
We do have a memorandum from Tim Foran that, outlines the changes that would be good to send to the townships. And we can put that in the pack for the city, if they, what we're changing. There's 4 things we're changing, and here's what they, so this is the roadmap as to what's happening.
That was a memo from Attorney Ferrand.
It was in our packet last month,
Oh, yes.
I believe so.
yes. Well,
It was addressed to the UPC, so. we have it.
Do you want to walk through those changes? Does this board want to hear those? And do we want to amend the motion to include those body amendments to the contract as well? This should move. The amendments to the agreement need to move forward as a unit to the parties.
And we've all seen those,
Yes,
other than the appendix F.
correct.
So we are recommending this change to the board, so we're not taking action on this, we're just recommending to move forward.
Okay.
So,
Does David's motion include that as well as appendix F?
I don't, we're just recommending that the ordinance changes take place. That's just a useful, another useful document that could go with the package to be in the board members packet,
The contract amendment move
the
forward.
contract.
Yeah.
So.
The
we're gonna
contract amendments move forward, yes, okay.
Yes, we're recommending that the contract amendments move forward. The Fran memo is a useful
Yeah.
piece that could go with that to explain to the board members who have to look at what they're actually approving.
Yes. Just wanted to be clear that we're looking to send it forward for both appendix F
Yes.
and the body that was in the packet last week.
Yes.
Is that clear? And does your motion include that, do you think?
I believe so. I was trying to find some clarity around that at the very beginning. I think this helps. Moving this all, it's all connected as the same, part of the same thing. It all has to happen.
Yes.
So your recommendation was, or your motion was to recommend. I don't know what,
I think he said this, so that's why.
I
wanted to
was thinking
clarify.
about that, but not having some of these other documents in our possession right now. Not a previous packet, not this packet, right? Can we do it?
This is on the last packet, I just pulled.
Yes. We do these two things separately.
We could do them either way. All right, there's a motion on the floor. Why don't we're ready to take action on this one? Are we?
We've got one, not
Okay.
specific, but more general question about this. So just out of curiosity, imagining the individuals that could express some pushback on this idea, because this is going to add some cost nowhere else, at least to the city. But I don't know how the township's fees are going to adjust relative to this. Do we do any communication to like the home builders or anywhere through this process, or does that seem, not that we necessarily change this, it is what it is, but I'm just wondering how we communicate this kind of thing generally.
We will be planning to do that. We always, we'll be communicating to, our known builders of developers that we work with often, usually in anticipation of changes in either construction costs, that's is currently $6,000, or changes in, meter cost or, some of these fees. And this would be one example where we'll be communicating that. We'll also be communicating this to developers that are looking at bigger projects. So there's an example both in Appendix F and then in the Chapter 38, which is the city rate ordinance, shows a breakdown table by meter size. So there would be developers that would be looking for larger meters that we'd be communicating to. We haven't started that communication yet because these numbers have been in flux. This is also part of the overall rate package that we're going to talk about as well, that will also be coming to city commission meeting. So usually we're planning to come in front of city commission in a work session or business meeting in November. I believe it's the November 20th meeting. So we start to gear up for that. So I would imagine probably in anticipation of that city commission meeting, we're also going to be reaching out to our industrial customers. There's a lot of communication that we've got to make there. We'll also be reaching out to our developers and builders and talking to those groups as well. And just having these conversations and showing them what these numbers are all about.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. So there have been no further changes to the body of the amendment the recommended changes since they were in our packet. So even though it's not in the packet today, we did look at that. I think we can refer to that document that was in the public.
I would make a motion that the attorney put together the contract amendments from our packet in September meeting, which included a definition of system capacity buy-in fee, provision for allowing the UPC to analyze the methodology of that buy-in fee, provision defining the system capacity buy-in fee as a water service revenue, and an appendix containing the methodology by which the system capacity buy-in fee is calculated. Those are the 4 bullets that were included in our memo received at the last meeting to have the attorneys address those components necessary to implement a system capacity bond. And others as necessary to implement the fee as we have approved it, along what have you. But
So that's a motion. Support?
Support. Yep.
Motion by Peter, support by Jim. Discussion.
I tried to read those directly off the document that was in
No, that's good.
but those are the things I think they're indicating are necessary to make this one.
I think we talked it through previously, so all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Next item is B, capital improvement program. Item 1, I don't think there's anything new there. Item 2, the existing developments, that's what we call the neighborhood expansions. And if you want to give,
Yeah, we, presented that to the UPC last month, to get feedback. They're gonna be taking that to the regional commission for further feedback on the 26th,
yes,
October 26th. We will then have, hopefully have a quick turnaround with the committee to discuss any final changes. And then bring it back to the UPC in November for adoption of a policy.
any questions? Cost recovery, unique extension projects, that's a placeholder. I don't think there's anything on that today. Utility financial policy, item C. The last meeting, we talked about perhaps a subcommittee meeting, but I don't think that has occurred.
Correct. I think, and this is just my recollection, and it's not great. But I wanted to have Jeff here when we were talking about the utility financial policy, and he wasn't at the last meeting. And so I thought it would be best to see if there was like a formalization or kind of this is what it is concept to give you an opportunity to say where we were. Okay.
Yeah, I think based on the discussions that we've been having, currently there's so many questions kind of floating around as to like, what is it exactly that we're trying to look at and figure out here, that it'd be better if just a couple of us got together and just sat down and dug into it. And I think that was where the concept of subcommittee came from, that we could just sit around. Kind of like on some of these other topics, we could take, some time and hours to kind of delve into it and kind of parse it out as to what the real questions are and focusing on those. So, I would suggest that you and I, and then, maybe our CFO, Steve Asenzi, from the city of Kalamazoo, sit down, and then we'll go in what other historical documents we need, and then if we can put out other paths to answer other questions, we can do that. But what I'd like to do is, and if that's okay with the group, is have three names I just mentioned, and then we would report back next month.
I think that makes perfect sense.
Thank you.
Do we need official action to make a subcommittee?
I know how to find.
Okay, all right. Very good. Item D, the update on the 2023 water rates. And there is information in our packet, and then Jim and Danica are online as well.
Yes, good morning. This is Jim.
Morning. Now, let you introduce this item, Jim?
Sorry. This is Jim from Stantec. Do you want me just to kind of give a quick overview with the, kind of the additional information that we've sent to James and UPC regarding the water rate study since our last call, or
That would be helpful.
okay. We, as previously mentioned, we had a number of discussions regarding the system capacity buy-in fee, and think we have that issue resolved. Then we also have provided an updated ordinance reflecting the 6% water rate increase that we have previously discussed with you. And so I think at least from Stantec's perspective, we believe we have the new rates to be put in effect 1/1/24, subject for kind of your approval and then ultimately implementation. So I think really from my perspective, the last thing we have to do is to kind of tidy everything up in a report and then issue our report of our recommended findings, which will include all the support for the 6% rate increase, the support for the rate design, and also the support for the system capacity buy-in fee.
So, Jim, Peter Hefner here.
Yes, sir.
In the packet provided to the board members, is there a document, and I'm asking the board too at the same time, Jim. But did you receive something that looked like that?
No, I don't believe so.
So is there anything in this packet that looks like a report or a calculation of the rates?
There is a table summaries of what the proposed rates are
Sure.
from Stantec. And there's also ordinance that would be in our, 6% applied
Sure.
to the ordinance to show what the ordinance would look like.
So what I would suggest in this case is yesterday at 12:30, I received the information related to the rate calculation from Jim as I was working with the group in the calculation process. And this has more detail, kind of what maybe your report will become, Jim. I don't know what it'll look like. But what I would suggest is perhaps we share this with the others. So I specifically asked Monday, there was email from Jim, Mr. Baker, that said, hey, what do you need to see? And I said, I need to see the rate calculation. And then I contacted Mr. Behrman, and he had emailed me, and I said, give me what you can on the rate calculation so I can see how it's occurring, right? So I saw this in a online meeting several months ago, before there was a connection or the right to use fee or whatever. And we walked through it and we saw some things that we were like, something's not quite right, or what have you. So I first saw this yesterday at 12:30, and I spent a little time looking at it. I have several questions about it, not that I think are going to, but I would suggest that if we are going to follow a schedule that Mr. Baker provided me with and approve this rate calculation at the next board meeting, that we all take a look at something such as this, and that I will ask specific questions of the rate consultants and be prepared to come back and to say, yep, that makes sense. And I don't know if you were gonna walk us through anything today, Jim. You have in the past kind of showing us some slides, and this includes them, some of them. But if we all had a chance to actually, more than look at it in a 5-minute period at this meeting, we could come back with questions or address questions before we come back and approve this.
Two questions, Peter, knowing that you're the CPA among us. Is that sufficient information for you to understand the rate calculation? Or do you have what you need?
No.
Okay, that's the first question. The second question is, are you going to ask the questions that you have already today?
I would like to just, I apologize, but I did get it yesterday at 12:30. So I haven't even gotten through the entire document, but I already have some questions, and they're not, my thought is we want to make this calculation perfect and very consistent with the contract, because this is our first try through this process, and it's the model that'll be followed probably for 40 years. And I don't think I would do anything to change the substance of the calculation, but I can't see the calculation. But just some maybe perhaps terminology or understanding where something is, or how it's working, that we get all that dialed in so that it's exactly as I might see, or we would all see the contract should have done the calculation. I'm not saying it's a bad calculation. I just don't see the underlying what it is. But I suspect, look at this, I could ask questions with them online, and I would be comfortable with what it's doing. But with just this, no, I do not. You can't see how it's being calculated. It's just showing you like data, and then here's the result. Which I understand, they've read the contract. And I think that's what it's following. And I believe it is, so I'm not saying it's bad. I just want to understand it maybe a little bit.
A little more transparency.
Yeah. So we initially walked through how they're doing it, and it was like looking at Excel. And now I just have some questions like this conceptually or that conceptually or what have you. I don't know that it would change the calculation at all, but to kind of then the underlying model is just like the contract says it should be, and the next rate consultant can look at something.
So is your intention then to meet with Stantec in the coming week?
But yeah, I can surely do that, but I do want to get through all of it before I do that.
Yes.
So I looked at it for about an hour yesterday, and I was like, I have some questions. And so I looked at Mr. Baker's schedule, and he says, at our next meeting, we need to approve the rate. And for me to feel comfortable doing it, I just want to understand it a little more. And I think you should see something before you just get something on the screen that says approve 6%. But that's my take.
Yeah.
Peter, this is Jim from Stantec. Yeah, we'd be happy to set up, whatever works in your schedule early next week, just kind of a follow-up discussion on the schedules that we sent you. We term those workbook schedules, and they come right out of the financial analysis management system model. You are correct. They will appear in the report, ultimately in the report, as the support for the 6% increase. But to the extent you have some follow-up questions, let's try to set some time up next week for yourself and James and us and anybody else from UPC that would like to sit in those discussions and address the questions you may have.
Yeah, yep, that would work perfectly, and, maybe later next week, as far as early next week, that's not gonna work for me. But, I would also suggest that this group is going to be asked to adopt the rate, so if there's some kind of report, it ought to be drafted and provided, so people can look at something before they attend. Personally, I think that makes a lot of sense, just because it's a lot to cover, a lot to understand. And then you can bring meaningful questions to Stantec. Does that make sense? Maybe what, I'm just throwing this out there, Jim, but perhaps we provide what you provided to me to the rest of the board, and then ask them to provide me with any questions they may have, so I can address them with you when we get together and have them resolved and therefore that the next meeting we can approve a rate with, the knowledge that any concerns these individuals might have would be addressed. Does that make sense? Is it going too far? I can just look at it and, with the concept of equal rates, if the rate's too high, next year it'll just be lower. You know what I'm saying? So it's not like a us, them, or anything like that. I just want to make sure when we do it the first time that it's really, really good, and then we can just go into the future and say, following the contract and everything is great.
I appreciate your questions.
Yeah, I think these are all very good questions. I think if you meet with Stantec, if you could include James Baker and Steve Sensi.
Yep.
And that way we're all on the same page. Financial, what's going in and what's coming out financially. I think your idea of us getting that paper report that you have, paper ahead of time. Because I think just in the big picture, the schedule that we're on is to have the UPC make a recommendation in November. So that the Kalamazoo City Commission can adopt it as an actual ordinance during the month of December, and then the rates go into effect in January. So that's the track that we're on right now.
Yeah, and I want to make sure we do that. Just I feel like I have an understanding of this and how it was calculated in the past and what the contract says, and I want it to be dead on, and it very well could be. I just don't have that confidence at this point.
What I would suggest too, following on that train of thought, is that at our November meeting, Stantec provide us a presentation to walk us through this so that we're all getting to that final point, to your point. Okay, everybody's all on the same page. We've got a presentation from Stantec, we've got the documentation, and people feel comfortable, or they might have questions. So, but to have Stantec make that final presentation on what we're about to vote on.
Sounds good.
So you want to see this?
Yeah, I think that.
Okay, sure.
So you're
I'll give it to all of you.
to have that, and then a presentation.
That and answers to any subsequent questions you ask and have answered
Sure.
that are pertinent to coming to this board.
Or if you see something, let me know and you can look at it before later and next week. And I'll get you this today.
Yes.
So Peter, do you need us to forward the workbook schedules, or will you or James do that?
You can forward that. Does James have this?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe I CC'd him on my email to you with those attached. I'll double check. If not, I'll forward them definitely to James if he doesn't have them already.
We will ask Mr. Baker just to forward that to all the board members today, and if they have questions or concerns, they can participate in our meeting, or they can forward those to me and I can address them and give a response. That's fair.
Oh, very good.
Question?
Yes.
Just looking forward, because November, December, we're also going to be, UPC needs to be in front of the city commission at that, when they take it up as an ordinance. UPC is also going to be out at the representatives from UPC is also going to be out at the townships or the SCF and the wellhead protection ordinances. So it's going to get pretty busy in December. What date is the city commission. Do we have that so we can start thinking ahead as, or maybe that's better?
And last year we attended two, I think, right?
Yeah, because you had an emergency, yeah.
Because there's two steps to
There's two
the
steps to
ordinance
ordinance,
adoption.
correct. And then so we're currently planning to present to the city commission in kind of a work session format, although this might be at the regular meeting, a presentation that would go into the, our capital program, the overall programs, and what those rate impacts are. And that's on November 20th. So we would like to be able to represent, maybe not complete ordinance, but what the recommended rate impacts are to the city commission on November 20th.
The committee of the whole or business meeting?
We just looked at it yesterday. Was that the business meeting or?
So because of the Kalamazoo City Commission schedule has changed a little bit because of the new elected laws, so it will not be at the 5 o'clock meeting. It would have to be at the 7 o'clock. It'd be at 7 o'clock. But on the so again, just to kind of the big picture, the November 20th, 7 o'clock, Kalamazoo City Commission presentation and an overview, kind of an informational presentation on where we are with the rates. And then December,
We won't be setting a hearing date at that time then?
well, December 4th would be the first meeting in December. So we'll probably bring it for the first reading.
First reading,
And
okay.
then December 18th would be back for adoption.
So last year, I believe, attended one of the meetings. And those were the actual ordinance meetings, I believe.
Those were in the very beautiful, I think that's your commission's chamber. So whatever meeting that was.
So just because we do it twice, I mean, really, we're just kind of setting the date of the hearing at our first meeting. Where we're taking actual action on it is at the second meeting. So I'd say that's the most, whatever's convenient, but that's when we're actually acting on the ordinance is at the second meeting, which is on the 18th. Don't schedule any, big presentation for now.
So I think it's probably, I don't know that UPC needs to be at the workshop, especially if we're in agreement with the rate proposal, but at least at the adoption stage, because it says we need to be there in the contract. Unless somebody thinks that we need to be at the workshop as well. And we can discuss this next month.
Right.
Next month is meetings on the 16th, correct?
Night. I thought
You
it
know,
was
it,
the-
it might bring some, and I don't know that.
I think it was on a schedule for the 16th, but I think the second Thursday is actually the 9th.
Okay, yes, it is.
I think we ought to be at both.
Okay.
That's my thought, is to say, the UPC is working with the city on the water process, and that this is what we support, so that your board knows that, and then should there be a question, perhaps at the second one, maybe be there in case.
So they identified 3 meetings and you said we should be at both.
Oh.
So which 2? So there's the information meeting they're having and the city is having, and
Should
then,
be part of the business meeting, but will be a section of it, will be specific to that.
So I would think we ought to be at the 2, like you do a first read and then.
yes, the formal adoption.
Yeah, so at the first read, perhaps be there to stand up and say, this is what the UPC is. And then should there be controversy, be there at the second meeting to support this is the decision that we believe should
Do
be
you,
made.
do you have discussion at all at the first meeting?
Sure. So
Okay.
again, the way it usually works is that a lot of times at the first reading of an ordinance, city staff, in this case, James Baker as director and Steve Sensi as CFO would most likely give a presentation on here's where we are with, we'll be talking about water and wastewater at that time. Because the intent is to implement both in January. So first reading, generally there's a presentation on it, and then sometimes when it goes back to second meeting, there's more of a summary recap of it. That's typically, but everything just depends on how the flow of the information is going and the topic. We might
Okay.
adjust it as we need.
And we can determine that at the next,
Okay.
come on, that time. But at least we all understand it's the process and we need to get our end of it completed.
Yep.
Next week, next.
Okay, that's good. I think we're done with the rates updates. Thank you, Jim. Anything from anyone else? Any questions or closing comments on that? Okay, item E is the wellhead protection.
That is, the draft documents are completed. We sent that again to the regional commission. And we're gonna have a presentation and discussion on that at that time in the 26th. Where I imagine it will, if there's any comments and last minute changes, then we'll get that out to the townships for the adoption of the ordinance and the performance standards. And so that will then go to the townships for approval. And so that's why the schedule in November and December is going to get busy, because we'll want to be there as representatives of the UPC to discuss the contract amendment that we voted on and the wellhead protection.
Thanks, and this is nothing that the UPC votes on, but you're keeping us apprised of what's happening with that.
Yeah, just update this both of these are once it is discussed and moved forward at the regional commission level, then it goes out to the townships and we'll adopt.
Thank you. And then item F on the agenda was added at the beginning of the meeting, the quarterly financial review, and Peter, you handed out a one-page summary.
Yeah, so, Mr. Baker's staff provided me with a budget and actual report for revenues and expenses for the, water system. And, I pulled that data into this document and, just made a comparison. And, it's in the back corner, and I did hand it out to those individuals who were sitting, before I put it in the back corner where you enter the room. And so if you would work your way down the left, 2/3 of the way, do you see the word revenue?
Mm-hmm.
And take a look at the line following it, 536 to the right, and you'll see 74%. So the revenue for 3/4 is 74% of the budget, which seems to be exactly where we would think we should be. And if you work your way to the left of that 74%, you can see in 2023, the revenue is $23 million. To the left of that, the 22 number was 18, so substantial increase. And you can see to the left of that is the budget at $31 million, so tracking well at a very summarized level. On the revenue, that is the operations where you're charging the customers. Those following revenues, my understanding or take, it's my thought, is these are primarily related to capital and how it's being financed and whether they're bonding. And we know that there was bonding in the previous year that carries over to the next year. So I thought the real number to look at was that 74%, to say we're tracking pretty well on the revenue side, which is great. And then up above, we have the expenses and broken into the various cost centers that they are using at James's department. Now there are variances and projects. I would think the construction period, when we're talking about any type of capital things, is really, you don't know until you get to the end of the year if something carries over to the following year. Obviously, you wouldn't probably be doing a lot of projects when the ground's frozen and that type of thing. So I just kind of scanned through there and said, how did we do compared to our budget? And it looks like we're well under our budget. And on the far right, it's 2023 actual as a percentage of 2022 actual. You can see right off at the top, 140% of the previous year. So the dollars being spent are more than 2022, yet within the budget, which is what we would expect, And so that's kind of a big picture look at it. I have this, I can email it to you, you can click on it, you can see every line of expense if you want to. But I was just kind of looking at it, big picture perspective, and we felt it was meaningful to do this on a quarterly basis, so I did so. And I didn't have any specific questions, or I would have brought them to James right off the bat. But I was happy to see, okay, we're doing well on the revenue side. Looks like expenses are within budget. Sounds like we're on plan. I could be totally wrong, James. Please fill in the blanks if you see something or what have you, but.
No, I think, yeah, Peter, it's a great assessment. You know, there's some of the line items where you see on the expenditure side, you might see like 300% or something. That's usually an indicator that we've got more activity in that line item than we did previously. And that is reflective of, you know, some intentional work that is happening there. So some of those would include regulatory compliance and some of our environmental programs. That's in line with, you know, increased compliance that's happening across the state. The capital numbers can be a little hard to follow around because you bring dollars in with bond sales, and then projects are encumbered usually a whole lot up front, and then they take time to build out. So those numbers may not be actually reflective of where the work is at any given time. But that said, you can see things are progressing well. We're very confident with both the revenues coming in. That looks positive in terms of it's where we wanted it to be, and expenditures are staying within bounds where, you know, we had budgeted on them at this point. So things are looking, you know, very well with this report.
Any other questions?
I think it's very helpful and very nicely laid out. I really appreciate it. A little walkthrough also just helps. Just a question about this. Do we track, say on the revenue side, our, you know, owed but not paid, you know, what might be our debt?
So bad collection.
Like delinquents?
Yeah,
Yeah, yes.
There is actually a line, in the expense side of even write-off, so you could see to what extent it is. I can pull it up and share it with you after the meeting or email it to you. Or I can email you this and you can just click on it and it'll show you everything in it.
yeah,
But they are definitely tracking the write-off component.
yeah. So that would be certainly something to watch as a trajectory over time.
Sure.
Yeah, and some of right now we're not doing shut-offs.
Yeah.
So some of these delinquents are floating a little bit higher, but then they pay and they come back. One of the things that we're gonna be bringing back in 24, and this will be part of our presentation, is that we are gonna be bringing back shut-offs. And you'll see, we've done some studies on this. Our delinquencies are not exactly in zones, if you will, from census tract data that would reflect with census tract data of poverty. They're everywhere. So their ability to pay and willingness to pay isn't in line. And with the shut-off program, that helps to, you know, separate those back out again. So also, we're going to be bringing forward our partnership with Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. We got the grant, and that's going to be implemented through the Community Action Agency of South Central Michigan. So it's us and many other counties. But the good news is that payment arrears is covered for, you know, everybody that's 200% of federal poverty and below. So there's going to be more communication about that program coming out. We're real excited about that, and that's through 24. And it's probably going to take us most of the way through 24 to start to get those numbers back to where they were in 19, to where they start to make sense and seem to track typically where we would expect them to be.
Thank you. Next item is new business, the Ross Township request for water extension. We will be reviewing action today, and want to introduce this.
Sure.
Appreciate your memo.
Yeah, so in the board packet, there is a memo, roughly, you know, a little bit more than one page. That talks through kind of what the, you know, what the action is or what we're requesting, what we're proposing. That is then supported by, you know, several pages and presentations and just all kinds of other stuff. So my, thought here today was just to broadly introduce it. And then, you know, have the board start to engage and, you know, can feel, I don't want to go through all of this. That would be probably somewhat mind numbing. But, Jim, go ahead.
But I do have a question. Just tell me, explain what a retail franchise agreement is.
Yes, yeah. So, currently, the water system, everybody here is retail, the whole system is retail. And what that means is that the system, we produce the water at the stations. That's a treatment process. And then it goes into the pipelines, towers, everything else. And then the retail component is, you know, we're actually, you know, reading the meters, we're doing, you know, we're sending the bills. And so all that is all
So
together.
it's nothing special.
Nothing special. In wastewater, there's different, you know, there's the treatment that Kalamazoo does. There's retail service provided that there's, I believe, 6 townships and 2 other municipalities that are receive retail service. And there's also other groups, wholesale. City of Portage, for example, is a wholesale customer of Kalamazoo. Go Lake Sewer and Water is a wholesale customer of Kalamazoo, where they have their own retail customers, and then they send it down the pipe to Kalamazoo, and Kalamazoo provides the treatment. There are other models that provide for retail relationship with water. That was planned in this master water agreement. There's a section reference Article 2.1, which references a future Go Lake Sewer and Water service area where Kalamazoo would provide wholesale water. So we provide like pipeline water to Go Lake Sewer and Water, and Go Lake Sewer and Water would then take that water and provide retail service to a smaller subset area. Thanks. So I guess I'll just start out, our recommended action that we're bringing forward would be a retail franchise agreement with Ross Township as a 10th signatory municipality of the water service agreement. So what we're saying is that we'll just bring them in on the same contract that everybody else has, not a separate, different contract. We're looking at municipal extension into Ross Township, inclusion of the capital plan, design and all applicable project costs associated with Ross Township extension within the proposed FY 2025 DWSRF project plan. November 1st, we plan to submit what's called an intent to apply. It's an online form now. It used to be we type it out, send it in. It's now online. We basically go in and describe all the different projects that we plan to do and apply for with a project plan. That project plan is a bigger document that would come before the city commission to get approved and then applies for that project plan. So in 2022, we went through a whole process with city commission. We got this plan approved, we submitted it, and we did not get funded. We scored 85. Yeah.
It's submitted to the state of Michigan.
Correct. Submitted to the state of Michigan, to Eagle. And then it gets scored. So we were not successful in that last submission.
Now, when you're submitting, is that for a grant funding?
So when you submit your project plan, you're submitting that it's kind of all of the above. It's for a grant, it's for low interest financing, it's for principal forgiveness, and it takes multiple different funding pots all together. It's kind of like the state's clearinghouse. If you want water funding, that's the program to go through, and they'll put you with the right amount of funding for your project need. So, you know, just to talk a little bit about what makes that attractive or beneficial relationship for the system to engage with Ross Township to put this package together to apply for the funding application. I just talked about our, we were not ranked for FY 2024. We scored 85 points, which is really good. The project funding stopped at 90 points. So we've got, essentially we had Kalamazoo Township water main replacements. We had City Kalamazoo lead service line replacements together as a project. We also had some limited work we were doing at stations. What we're proposing with the intent to apply now for 2025 projects is to take that same City Kalamazoo lead project, some pipeline lining projects in the township, extension in Richland and in Ross Township for PFAS response, and a PFAS improvement at station number 5. That's a project that is currently sitting in the capital program, but not in DWSRF. So with bringing all these projects together, we could then get scoring points for PFAS. We could get scoring points for regionalization, where the system's expanding, but we're together as regional partners. And then there's also additional points for water quality improvements and everything else. So the intent is that kind of rising tides will lift all ships, and that together we could get funded, so that Kalamazoo could get funded for the lead service line replacements, and Ross Township could get funded for these PFAS extensions, and Richland Township could get funded for the PFAS extension. So it's kind of all together as a project to lift that up. We go through, we talk about the background of discovery of PFAS in Richland and Ross Townships. There's some discussion of Richland and Ross kind of together. Richland's already a customer community. They have been since the 80s. So there's no real action there's no action really needed for that. We wanted to bring up the retail conversation. The last paragraph talks about Article 2.1, because Richland right now has the ability within the contract to, at any time, kind of approach the UPC and request that a next section of pipe or whatever new area be a wholesale provided with retail provided by Go Lake Sewer and Water. And the reason for that is Go Lake Sewer and Water already provides sewer service in those areas for Richland, Ross, Prairieville, and Berry Township. And I'll let John talk about any Go Lake Sewer and Water, because John's the Go Lake Sewer and Water director on that. So there's some related nature of this, as we extend the pipes in Richland, those would connect to Ross, and then from there, it would be in Ross, and it can get built any way you want to build it. There's flexibility there, but the Ross Township Board did request retail. We have Ross Township here, their supervisors here, as well as Trustee Langshaw. So we thank them for coming, and it's kind of the background. If there's any questions, I have to go into it.
Thank you.
So this proposed project, is the thought you would go to drinking water revolving fund or what have you?
Yeah.
And see to what extent they would assist in funding this project?
Yes.
And should they say it's a grant, 100% put the pipe in, which, I don't know the implication. I understand kind of what PFAS is, but it's a big issue. But should they come back and say, no go this year, what do you do at that point?
The concept that if it's not funded, and just like we did here with our Kalamazoo project, that we wouldn't do the work. We'd kind of look for other funding opportunities, another bite at the apple, if you will, the next funding year. That's kind of the same concept. Now, the 100% or 50% or anywhere in the middle, once the entire project plan gets funded or not funded, and they don't go through and say, well, that amount is paid for. So usually, like I'll use an analogy. If like you go to the grocery store and you spend $200 on groceries, and you got a coupon for 10% off, and then your bill is $190. Well, or $180, sorry. You could go through and say, well, we got 20% off every single item, or there's one item we got 20% off, or you could, have as much fun with that as you want, or you could just say, look, it was the whole thing is reduced. That's the same way that Eagle does it. There is, some specificity with PFAS specific projects that they fund and with lead specific projects that they fund. And if that's the case, I'll show you that in the award. So you could have a big project plan that had many different areas. They got specific funding for PFAS and specific funding for lead, and then the whole project funded or not funded. We saw that last year when we got the Booker funds. We applied for a bid project for lead, a $20 million project. The project did not get funded, but we got $5 million for lead service fund replacement. So that was like a blow, so to speak.
What's the cost estimate on something like this?
So right now, the estimates are still very preliminary. We put together some footage estimates and applied our, what we're kind of seeing right now with it between $350 a foot for water main, which is extremely high. It's kind of really increased lately. We're looking at both Richland, about $9 million, about $9 million in Ross. When you add in engineering and some other administrative costs and some contingency, that drives that number up a little bit higher. So I would say that, we'll probably need some more work with those estimates, but that's, both Richland and Ross will probably be in the 10 million range. And we'll probably need to do some more work to finalize what those estimates would look like.
10 million total for both.
10 million each, 20 million
Each.
total. Yeah,
Okay.
10 million each.
So just to add to that conversation, we had, James came out to a meeting at Ross Township a week ago, week and a half ago. And I was there, and just, so the idea is that have Ross Township become a retail customer, do the intent to apply, then the system would need to put together a project plan that we talked about, that's due in March. And there's cost to that, but that would be a system cost. Is that your intent?
Correct.
And those are running $30,000-$50,000, so sort of in the area. It's not like a big capital expense, but it's an expense to the system. You apply in March, you hear back in September, so we wouldn't know until next September what kind of funding this project would get, and then just what decisions need to be made. And we had talked about at the meeting that because of the uncertainty of that and the cost of the engineering part of that, is that we wouldn't make those decisions, even to move forward with engineering, until we know what the funding package is in September. Because you still have time after that, it would delay it 6 months, 4 months, 5 months, so it's not crucial. But that's sort of the backside of that. And when would that come back to DPC in terms of the funding decisions?
Yeah, it would come back as like the capital. So yeah, it's part of it would be in the capital plan for 25. And whether it stays in the plan, it would, kind of comes back. So yeah, there would be an opportunity. So for example, this year, we had in the capital plan, there's like 30 million shown for project plan DWSRF. That didn't happen, so it just it's not going to get executed. And so that's some of the conversations we've had about the capital plan, is that the capital plan on paper appears to be very overstated. and Peter just knows this, we've got probably something like $60 million annually that show in the capital plan. We've discussed that, it's broken out into two parts, DWSRF, and then what we would consider kind of open market. We only fund about 80%, we've lowered that to about 75% of the open market project, list. And then, you know, if a project doesn't get funded, then it doesn't happen in that year. And so those are kind of projects are coming in and going out based on that execution.
So, in UPC, Tony is in favor of this project, or in favor of moving forward with the contract discussions. But I will point out that the contract indicates, expansion, distribution, production, or transmission facilities outside the geographic boundary, so that would be Ross Township. So as a city, with input and comment from the Utility Policy Committee, may expand the distribution, production, transmission, blah, blah, blah. So UPC doesn't make a decision, it's the city that makes a decision, but we should, comment, I guess, give our opinion as to whether we support this or not.
I have a question. In our packet here, David, here, we do have the information from the Ross Township meeting. I just had a couple of questions about that, just because I think sometimes in the past, we could do this and then we have folks from a new area show up at city commission meeting, we're gonna take an action, say, hey, don't do this. I don't care, you know, who voted for it. So I was just wondering, was there good turnout? Are people generally supportive of it? I see it was unanimous. I don't know if everybody was present on the night when this motion was approved, but.
Great question. We had. And. Not only of the public water initiative, but they're actually taking the rumor mill to task and correcting their, if it's off base. So we got very positive feedback from the residents, very positive.
Now, also, what board was it? Yeah.
Question two, just again for Ross Township, do you think there's an understanding too, from the citizen standpoint, that the financing for this is not in place yet? That there's different ways that could be accomplished, everything from 100% state grant to 100% paid for by the customers, and or something in between.
Absolutely, and that was one of the big hangups with several individuals. James did a phenomenal job. He had that question, many different varieties of that question came up, and so even knowing that we're going into an environment of unknown, people are still very supportive of it.
Thank you.
One last question of that. Are there already people who shouldn't be or aren't using their individual personal wells for drinking water? Is that, or is this just something that's projected plume moving in?
there are wells that show results from a couple that are over the NCL and a few more that will be over it when the EPA cuts it in half, the NCL. The health department is supplying filters.
Yep.
For those people.
Yep.
So they are on, they're being filtered.
And I attended one of the Lost Township meetings, not this one, but the one before, and Eagle did a good job explaining and that they don't view that as a permanent solution. And you're filtering out of one tap, you're not filtering the water from the house. So it's not convenient.
So hopefully since Eagle is in favor of something like that, we'll get better. Cross our fingers we get, some funding.
So James, what action are you suggesting that we take as a UPC?
Yeah, I think I'm looking for, as Tom said, support to bring Ross Township as a signatory, customer of the system, they'll be like, I think that it's noted like the 10th community.
Yeah.
And then an understanding that the city's gonna, submit the, intent to apply form, and we're gonna include the Edison neighborhood, lead service line replacement project, the Richland, PFAS extension, the Ross PFAS extension, and the Station 5, PFAS treatment. So all those projects are gonna be grouped together. It's about $76 million in projects that we're gonna package together and submit. So, I wanna make sure that there's an understanding at the UPC level that, we're gonna have, Ross named and listed on there, and that's gonna go in, before we have a contract in place with Ross. So, I made the mention a few times, through engagement that, I'm getting a little ahead of my skis here. And so I want to make sure that, the UPC supports that, because before, we get an agreement finalized with Ross and signed by the city commission, we're going to be past the deadline for the ITA. So I think we've got to be able to move forward with that ITA, understanding that, it's our intent and that we plan to move forward. The submittal of the ITA is not binding. It's all work towards putting that project plan together, which will happen. There's a timeline in your packet that details that all out.
So would you like a motion to support, Ross Township, joining the water contract?
Yes.
We're going with, I'll let you go with it, but I think Director Baker's first paragraph in his memo.
Yeah, it's
the motion.
Yeah, it's a bit of a long-winded one, but that is essentially the recommendation.
I would make the motion that the first paragraph of the memo from
Director Baker.
be the motion.
Support, Escamilla?
That's good.
Thanks, John.
There's a motion by John, for the retail franchise agreement and November 1st, then to apply, as stated in the first paragraph of the memo. And support by Jay. Any further discussion?
I would just say one thing. I appreciate the continued collaboration. I think it's meaningful and important, and I appreciate all your work on it, James, and thanks for coming to this. And we might ask you to come to the city commission meeting when this gets voted on too, so.
Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next item is the professional services invoice approval. The two.
Invoice. Kind of move off, number 77269. With the payment of that invoice.
265.
Five.
I'll support it in the dark.
Motion by David, support by John, approve the Pioneer Newhoff invoice. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Abstain. I'm sorry.
Motion passes, 6-0 and 1 abstention.
Okay, move approval of Ridenow Hefner invoice number. You get it right this time. Thank you for printing it larger, 6124.
I'll support it.
Motion by David, support by John, approve the Rita Bell Hafner invoice. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
I would abstain.
Motion passes 6-0 and 1 abstention.
I'll just say that I think that we switched over accounting systems and they're just not caught up yet.
Okay,
They're a little catch up.
okay. Item, 8, the committee member, alternate attendee guest comment. So I'm gonna start with, the audience, Mark Elliott.
Well, the meeting that the Peters Court or review, G, free to move about it.
Gary? Okay. Diane?
And then online,
This is Joe Bond with the City Council. Who have no comment at this time.
Thank you. Here, any other comments, board member comments?
Just a comment that, the, in my opinion, is working very well. We're in the next few months gonna knock off a bunch of items that have been, working on for a while. Well, it's actually the SCF. Just getting the rhythm of the rates package and that kind of put down. I'm sure there's something else I'm forgetting, but congratulations. To everybody.
Thank you.
The only thing I'm just impressed that it's not a controversial board, that there seems to be trust in the room.
John?
Nothing. Nothing else. Just a quick question, maybe I should know, but terms, membership on this board, I have not looked back at that, what our situation is, talking about board working together for life. Yeah. It isn't? Okay.
It is live.
One comment. My thought for the position. I don't know if there's a requirement. You understand what I'm saying? I think we've been doing this for more than a year.
Could, dust off the bylaws and see what that says.
Yeah, I don't know that it says it every year, so.
The only comment I have is following Tom's comment about the progress. Is think about for next year, we'll have to set a schedule of meetings and now we're gonna meet monthly. Do we need to continue to meet monthly? The original vision was quarterly, but there was so much to work on that we set it for monthly. We do wanna get to quarterly, but I don't know if we're at that point. But we're. And we have, our next meeting is November 9th, and we have exhausted the meeting and we're adjourned. Thank you.
Done, no charge for on or off for either irrigation or if they like moving.